for a family being reunited after 6 years apart, particularly a mother and a daughter. You've got to feel that. Helen Dale is here with us in person for the first ever time. She first appeared on this show in August of 2020, right? And we've never met. Now she's here. It's incredible. Quite remarkable. It's St. Patrick's Day as well, something else to celebrate, which we'll be doing a little bit later on in the company of the three drinkers who've just been going around Ireland drinking, which sounds like a pretty good pastime to me. Also, of course, we will be talking to Ukraine later on. Kim Sen-Gupta is the Independent's defence correspondent. He's been out in Kiev for the best part of the last 3 weeks, and we'll find out from him what the latest is. We'll also be talking to Helen about this strange phenomenon currently going on, where people don't believe the story about what's happening in Ukraine. They actually think that the Russian propaganda is the truth, and they think that somehow we're all in the pay of the New World Order. I've never known this to be quite as bad as it is now. I mean, I've dealt with all sorts of people about 9/11. I've dealt with people about the moon landings. I've dealt with people about all manner of things that they've been paranoid about. But never quite as bad as this, never quite as widespread as this. So we'll take your calls on that as well, 0344 499 1000. Also, lots of you want to talk to me about your experience in the NHS too. Keep that coming as well, 0344 499 1000. You listen to me, Mike Graham, right here on the fastest growing radio station on the planet. It is, of course, Talk Radio.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Well, it is my extreme pleasure to welcome Helen Dale to the studio. How nice to meet you, finally.
Nice to meet you, finally, Mike.
I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone for as long or in such depth or with such sort of ease, really, without ever meeting them.
I don't think I have either. It's been a very strange sensation. I told friends today, I'm finally going up to Talk Radio Towers and
Isn't it
talking
nice,
to
though? Look at the view.
Oh, it's lovely. It's smashing.
Yes,
and I knew I got here as soon as I could see the Shard.
Yes, we can see the Tower of London in all its splendour. The sky is blue. There are no clouds. It's a wonderful day.
Looks
so
fab.
You've come up from what is technically the sort of home counties,
The home
right?
counties, yeah. I live in Hampshire.
Very nice. And how is Hampshire these days?
Well, Hampshire is its usual leafy, prosperous home county self, although I have had the very interesting experience of twice in one day getting Ukraine truthers in person rather than on the internet.
That is weird.
It is weird.
Because I don't tend to get that. I mean, people recognise me quite a lot when I'm out and about, but they don't normally come up and say anything other than something like, hello, really nice to see you, can I have a picture? I haven't as yet. I mean, it could happen, I suppose. Nobody's actually come up and gone, you're a mad fascist, I'm going to punch you in the face. I've been quite fortunate in that way. But for you to get that is extraordinary.
I don't know that they, in either case, I was recognised. This is what alarmed me about it, is it was just casual conversation.
Right.
And it's the classic Alex Jones, make the frogs gay argument that none of what we're seeing in Ukraine is real.
Yes.
This is the argument that is made to you. And that all the pictures that we're seeing on telly are what they persist in calling crisis actors. Now, I have had this tweeted at me and said to me on social media, and my policy has always been up until now to just ignore it when it comes on social media on the basis that it's not representative.
Right.
But when people in your street, including a woman who cat sits for us, said where she works, she's had people coming into the shop where she works and running the Ukraine war isn't real, they're all crisis actors.
Yeah.
And she was just completely horrified.
And where do you think it's coming from? Because like I say, I mean, I used to do an overnight show on TalkSport many years ago, which is about as interesting and crazy as you would expect it to be. And we'd get lots of people ringing up about the New World Order. One bloke actually rang up and told me that the headquarters of the New World Order were in Greenwich. And I asked him exactly whether he had the address, because I was quite close to where I lived. I said, I'll go down and check it out. There's a Mexican restaurant. It might be above there. Don't know. He thinks George Bush has been there. I had other people calling me about 9/11, saying that, you know, anyone can see that the way that the towers fell down, they were clearly demolished from within with explosives. And, you know, these people were all experts in the demolition of high-rise buildings. You know,
yes, suddenly.
As indeed are the people who are telling me that this is all nonsense because they're all experts in Ukraine. And I've never seen quite as much of it as I have now.
I do think, and the piece that I wrote for Law and Liberty, which was published yesterday, and I believe you've retweeted it, and it's on my Twitter feed as well, and various other people have tweeted it as well, Konstantin Kizin has, and various others. I believe, and the argument I make in that piece at some length, is that you've got a situation where large parts of the media did not behave well during COVID.
No. And that's certainly true. And we
true.
certainly held them up to derision for it as well.
And we held them to, and TalkRADIO and the Independent Republic and various other outlets as well, held them up to ridicule and scorn because they deserve to be.
Yes.
This quite a lot of the problem seems to be the way the media has pivoted smoothly from COVID to Ukraine. And the thing that struck me that I think is very foolish when you do want to get accurate information out there is the constant use by people of fact checkers.
Yes.
Fact checkers have come to be seen as partial and not reliable for the very simple and basic reason that they got so much wrong during COVID.
Of course they did.
And I feel dreadful about this because the fact checkers aren't helping.
No,
You know,
also,
I
call me
see it.
old-fashioned, but, you know, when I worked in newspapers, and as I still continue to work in the media now, I check my own facts. I don't need somebody from some organisation that calls itself a fact checker to check what I say. You know, which is when I took exception to Facebook, when Peter Hitchens and I put up one of the chats that we'd had, one of many, in which the fact checkers at Facebook said some of the information in this may be misleading. And I was like, hang on a minute, well, exactly what do you think is misleading about what we've been discussing? None of it was misleading, but the fact checker said it was, so it must have been.
And these social media and various media outlets did not cover themselves in glory over COVID. And the way I put it in my piece, and I think it for Law and Liberty is worth reiterating here, just because the press behaved badly over COVID does not mean nothing is real.
Right.
And you have to be very careful and very aware of this contrarian posture that says nothing from the establishment or from the mainstream is true.
It's true, yes.
Now, that doesn't mean that you have to uncritically accept everything from the Ukrainian side or from Zelensky or anything either. We all know, for example, that the Ghost of Kyiv story turned out to be footage from a video game.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that kind of thing. So don't accept everything that comes from
But again,
from them.
as I was saying to somebody the other day, look at where it's coming from before you start accusing various people of being part of a propaganda machine, because it didn't come from the US government, it didn't come from the UK government, it didn't come from anybody in Western Europe. It was something that became a thing and it was written about. So it could have started anywhere.
It could. Well, this is the thing. If I knew, I often say this, if I knew what would go viral on Twitter, I'd have 337,000 followers instead of 37,000 followers.
Well,
Nobody can predict this.
It's like when people come to you and say, can you do a viral video for us? And I'm like, well, no, because you don't actually know what you're doing until it becomes viral.
It's like advertising.
Yeah.
People never know what's going to work in advance until it does. I mean, people can do split tests. I remember doing split tests and A/B frames and all of that kind of thing when I did some work in Adland, basically. And even then, though, we were fundamentally still guessing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I didn't know when I had that bloke on from Insulate Britain that I would become famous for saying that you can grow concrete. But, you know, there we are.
There we are. You become Concrete Mike instead of Iron Mike.
Exactly right. And I was never actually Iron Mike. That was made up. People just assumed IROMG meant I was Iron Mike, which is not true.
True,
It's the
Independent Republic.
Yes, quite. Iron Mike is Mike Tyson, which is an entirely different affair.
Yes.
Altogether.
And
But do you think it is because of social media's reach now that this is somehow made worse in a way?
I think it has been made worse. I used to think that all you saw on social media was the worst manifestations of this kind of quite odd behaviour.
Right.
That's what I used to think. And it's social media, the people who would say, people like Dave Rubin would say social media is not real life, Twitter is not real life, you know, be aware it's not representative. And demographically that's true.
Yes.
We know it's not representative of the population of the United Kingdom. But then a chap actually at the Institute of Economic Affairs called Christian Niemitz.
I know Christian, yeah.
Yeah, I may be saying his name incorrectly. He made the point that he wrote a very good piece where he said what's starting to happen now is things you see on social media where you think, oh, yeah, that's a bit nuts, crisis actors, you're all a bit mad, has now overspilt and into real life. And one of the things he pointed to was how, for example, lots of the riots that happened during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 in the US, they were all organised on Twitter. Yeah. And then worryingly, you think, oh, yeah, OK, so that's the lefties' home of choice. Everybody dogpiled Parler, supposedly for running the Capitol riots or allowing them to organise there. But you dig down into the FBI's data, which has now been made available, and you discover that people were organising those on Twitter as well.
Yes.
You know, and the smaller social media outlets like Parler didn't have much to do with it at all.
Right.
You know, so it's just become this incredible nonsense vector. And the difficulty is, of course, people can look at me or look at you and say, oh, yes, you're a pair of media commentators and you're getting up and calling and people for spreading nonsense when you've spread nonsense yourselves. And I like to think I have avoided doing that.
Yes.
And you have avoided doing that.
Well, we're quite careful not to, actually. I mean, people assume that that's not the case, but actually it is the case, that I'm very responsible about what we say and about what we deny and what we allow people to say on the air. And if somebody says something on the air which I don't believe to be true, I say that, you know, and we challenge them.
So you've got this nonsense vector, and there's been a sustained period of poor quality reporting, first about Black Lives Matter, then about COVID, where you had protests being described as largely peaceful, where behind the journalists buildings are burning down, or a policewoman gets knocked off her horse in the middle of central London, and the BBC in that case did the largely peaceful thing. This does not help. But to get back to the point I make in my Law and Liberty piece, it doesn't mean nothing is real. And what I tried to do, and I talked about this last time, but I hold it up again. This is my first novel, The Hand That Signed the Paper, where I address the historic issues.
Which was based in Ukraine, wasn't it?
Based in Ukraine.
Yeah.
These are the historic issues in this book that Putin is trying to use to justify his invasion. So when he says all Ukrainians are Nazis, where there's a genocide, we're freeing them from Nazis, what he's trying to do is make the country look like it has not changed since 1941. And because there was significant collaboration with Hitler by Ukrainians in
as there was in many countries, including Croatia, for example.
In 1941. And the one that's closer to home for us is everyone seems to have forgotten that Vichy France existed. You know, there was this whole chunk of a country which basically decided it wanted to do the French form of fascism in collaboration with the Nazis.
You only have to watch Casablanca to know about it.
Oh, well, yeah, Casablanca is the classic example, or Allo Allo. I mean, and I know people think, oh, yeah, they're just being funny, but underneath the humour in those films and TV series is real history.
Yeah, absolutely. But the point about Croatia, for example, fascinated me at the time, because Croatia was really the cause of the proper Balkans War in Europe in the 90s, because Croatia was granted nation status by the UN, regardless of what had gone before. There was no conversation about, well, hang on, what about the Ustasha and the fact that they were worse than they were literally thrown out of the Gestapo for cruelty.
Yeah,
that's how bad they were.
That's how bad they were.
But nobody gave a thought to the fact that, well, the Serbs are not going to be happy, neither are the Bosnians, and neither are the people in the northern part of what was then the former Yugoslavia, Slovenia. And neither were they going to be happy down in Kosovo.
And then it got worse and worse when some countries were admitted to the European Union and others weren't.
Exactly.
And I mean, I know it wasn't widely reported here, but there were huge internal ructions within EU countries over precisely this issue, and who was going to be in and who wasn't going to be in and how much would they be in. And you sort of look at it and you go, Brexit, but in Cyrillic.
Yes.
Let's have the same sort of really
like
ugly
decisions
fights.
do actually have consequences. And similarly now with the whole Putin war machine and the propaganda, I find it astonishing that people are willing to believe anything that comes out of Kremlin propaganda machines. You know, the idea that they've forgotten that the Russians were found to have poisoned the people on our very island, in Salisbury.
Oh, the Salisbury Cathedral and the lovely 141-metre spire.
Exactly
that
right.
one.
And the fact that they've also, been operational in certain parts of the world where they've literally poisoned people with plutonium. There was the tea, wasn't there, in London, where they carried the plutonium across London. I mean, as if none of that's happened.
I have had a sense, and this is partly in response to some of the conversations about The Hand That Signed the Paper, of Whiplash over the last month. As in 2 weeks ago, an Australian book chain did a big thing on books we recommend you buy. Bookshops exist to make money, and Ukraine was in the news, so mine was one of the ones that they've highlighted in their tweets and on their website and that kind of thing. And as of 2 weeks ago, the people who were having a go at me were the people who always did historically.
Yes.
I'm a conservative writer. I'm the only conservative writer of renown in Australia who's won big prizes. They don't like me. It was the wokies, the lefties having a go at me. As of yesterday, the piece that ran in Law and Liberty Not in person, because people don't necessarily know I'm a writer or don't recognise me or whatever over here. They do in Australia, but not here. But as of yesterday, all the people tweeting at me and saying and repeating Putinist propaganda basically were all conservatives or people who would consider themselves to be conservatives.
Right.
Although a couple of them I have to describe as being mad online right.
Right.
And that's Whiplash.
Right.
It's just extraordinary. Because I've got that sense of I've stayed in exactly the same place. My book hasn't changed. Not a word has changed. It's been out for 20-odd years. And everyone is processing around me. And it's just the most extraordinary sensation.
Weird, isn't it?
It's weird.
It's very odd. I mean, I'm looking today at somebody had recommended an organisation that we should talk to because they'll tell the truth about what's going on in Ukraine. Something called Mint Press News, right? Now, I've just been checking out a guy called Dan Cohen who works there. He's actually put a tweet out with a picture of President Zelensky sitting as he is talking to the US Congress, with that green T-shirt on. But they've drawn on the green T-shirt an iron cross. And then they've highlighted it and said, what exactly is going on here? Well, I'll tell you what exactly is going on here, Dan. You've drawn an iron cross on a guy that didn't have an iron cross, and now you're suggesting that means he must be a Nazi. It's ridiculous.
Well, I had to talk about this in my piece for Law and Liberty, which is this whole Vladimir Zelensky, the Jewish Nazi, is just completely bonkers.
Yes.
And I will repeat here what I say in my piece for Law and Liberty and what I also said on Live with Littlewood at the Institute for Economic Affairs, which is, in context, it is more significant that Ukraine has elected a Jewish president than it is that the United States with Barack Obama elected a black president. What was done to Jews in Ukraine, both when the Nazis were there, but also going back long before the Soviet Union as well, was worse than anything that was done to American blacks. I mean, this was a deliberate and targeted campaign of extermination.
Yes.
We're not talking about slavery here. The Germans at various times...
Talking about genocide.
We're talking about genocide.
Yeah.
At various times, the Germans tried to enslave some Ukrainians in East Ukraine and also tried to enslave many Russians, which is why if you see Russian, like the Spartacus unit, they're trying to call themselves Nazis. And they are literally, because of the Nazi view of Russian Slavs, not Ukrainians is a bit more variable, but Russians, they literally considered them Untermenschen, an inferior race. And you see these so-called Russian Nazis and you're going... You identify as a member of the master race, because I assure you, right now, Heinrich Himmler is spinning in his grave and would power Berlin if he thought that a bunch of Russians were claiming to be the master race.
Yes.
It's just trans Nazis are real Nazis.
Yes, it doesn't make any sense, and that is the thing. So, I mean, how did we counter it, though, is the question, I suppose.
I think there needs to be a little bit of honesty and a bit of introspection from people in the press. They might want to wind back their fact checkers. That strikes me as an easy and obvious thing to do, is to wind back their fact checkers. It's not helping. Even on Facebook, which has supposedly got all these fact checkers, there were people with the Putinist or the Russian Z symbol that they're using all over Law and Liberty's official Facebook channel, saying rude things about me, saying rude things about the magazine. Their fact checkers aren't working.
Right.
And
some of those people, I think, are genuinely part of the propaganda machine, aren't they?
They probably are. This is the thing. They're not. And the other thing is, a lot of them I don't think are actually bots.
Right.
I think they're real people who actually believe this stuff.
Yes. No, but what I'm saying is there's a difference, is there not, between those real people who believe it, but the people who are actually pushing it.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. I think there's people pushing it as well.
That's entirely possible as well. So I think backing off on the fact checkers and trying to tell people what to think is a good thing, would help the press more widely. Being frank when you don't fully know, talk about, frankly, the concept of the fog of news.
Yeah.
It's as bad as the fog of war, and we've got both at the moment, the fog of war and the fog of news.
Yeah.
I mean, if you only paid attention to social media, it would look like the Ukrainians have won every battle.
Yes.
But we know from what's going on in Mariupol particularly that that's absolutely not true.
Right.
And the Russians have now started deliberately shelling areas where civilians are hiding.
Right. And stopping any aid from getting through as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is the problem, isn't it, with things being as far away? Because, I mean, I was in Bosnia briefly, and in some ways that was a much easier war to report on, because there were peacekeeping troops there that you could align yourself with so that you wouldn't actually be in danger of being killed, because we've seen a couple of Fox News people killed already.
Yeah, there's been 4 journalists killed.
And it's a very
already.
dangerous place to be right now in Ukraine, because there is no kind of, if you like, safe area. Everywhere is kind of hot, if you like, and so there isn't really any place you can go where you know you're going to be looked after by the military.
Well, you could go to Lviv, which is quite safe.
Yeah.
But the problem is there's no story in Lviv
That's
at the
what I mean,
moment
yeah.
because and the two incidences of Russian shelling in Lviv were both directed at the airport because clearly they don't want the Poles to fly those spare aircraft that they've got to the Lviv airport because they know they could be.
But even
used.
at that, it can become dangerous very quickly.
Quickly, yes.
In a place like that, which is why I was in Vitez, which is central Bosnia. There was a British Army camp there. You know, every sort of everywhere around it was quite dangerous. But when you were actually staying there at that point, it was fine. You could sleep there without worrying about being woken up by somebody pointing a gun at you in the middle of the night. I was also in the same house as CBS, who had some very expensive bodyguards, which was rather nice because Daily Express didn't. You know, but so it's a very difficult war to get the truth out of because the journalists can't really get to all of it. Is what I'm saying, I suppose.
And to be fair, the ones that are there, the freelancers there, I've seen one chap. I'm sure I'm going to say his name wrongly, but it looks like Oz Chatterjee.
Yes,
but
we've spoken to Oz,
Yeah, and on his Twitter, he's completely honest when he can't get the full story because he knows he can't. He's just one person.
Sure.
And of course, yes, 4 journalists killed. One Ukrainian who worked for Hromadski, which is the Ukrainian equivalent of the BBC, who was actually killed when they shelled Babi Yar. The Russians shelled Babi Yar because the main Kiev TV studios are very close to the Babi Yar memorial, and of course the Russians managed to hit the studio but also hit the memorial, so it's all rubble at the moment.
Right.
And then there's the 3 others, the guy from the New York Times and then the 2 from Fox, one of whom was a Ukrainian stringer.
Yes. Yeah, it's sad, terrible stuff. Well, listen, fascinating times though, fascinating conversation. We're out of time, sadly. But Helen, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming in, and we'll see you again at some point, I'm sure. Now that all restrictions are off, people can actually go places, unless you want to go to a hospital, of course, in which case you're not allowed in. Don't know why. That's the place where the COVID is. This is Talk Radio.